Media Network proudly presents a weekly exploration of various spiritual practices with renowned spiritual authors, coaches, teachers, and Dr. Tracy Brown, RScP.
And now, here's Tracy.
Hey everybody, it's Tracy Brown, and I'm actually here fully, not half screen, but the full screen. Well, welcome to Poetry, Prayer, and Practice, where we get to look at poetry and take it in and feel the inspiration from it. And we talk a lot about prayer, the power of prayer, the technology of prayer, how we integrate prayer into our lives and practice. Really, we have the opportunity to look at all spiritual practices, but I find I especially love it when we dive into what are things that you might be doing already that you didn't even think of as spiritual practice, or what are some ways to really pump up or power up the spiritual practices that you are familiar with, because, maybe they've gotten a little stale, or you've been using them for so long, you're on automatic and you're not really allowing them to grow you, expand you, and evolve you. So that's what we do every week. And this week I am excited to have a conversation with Reverend Jeffrey Ryan. And we're going to talk about some of the interesting things that he is doing now. We're going to talk a little bit about the spiritual practice of visioning, which surprises no one who knows Jeff Ryan. And we're going to talk a little bit about how, as spiritually grounded people in general, and how, as spiritually grounded leaders in spiritual communities, we can integrate our commitment to inclusion. So I know that is a lot to talk about in less than an hour, but I'll tell you right now, I know we're not going to cover everything we want to cover. And so I am publicly inviting Jeff Ryan to come back before the end of the year so that we can do part 2. Because I already know. I'm going to be like, wait, there's more. So what do I know about Jeff Ryan? I'm going to just give you maybe 3 things that I know about Jeffrey Ryan. And then I'll bring him on and he can add anything else he wants you to know. So one easy thing that I know about Jeffrey Ryan is that he is married to an amazing man, and they have been a couple for a really long time. And I just love the way that he honors his commitment and his marriage and the way he talks about it and the way he behaves in it. So number 1. Number 2, an easy thing for me to share about Jeff Ryan is that he is a person who is, fan only if I use the full word, fanatic about visioning. And that's one of the reasons we're going to talk about that, and is able to not only describe visioning in ways that few others can, but the way he integrates it into everything that he does is like, that's how I use visioning. So that's number 2. Can't introduce Jeff Ryan without talking about visioning. And then the third thing that I'm going to share with you about Jeffrey Ryan is that he speaks Spanish. Like, he speaks Spanish, and he was one of the last people. If you had given me 1,000 people I know, and I was like, wait, you speak what? You're going to Mexico and you're speaking Spanish? Like what? So those are 3 random things, easy things. I could tell you at least 15 more, but then I would end up eating up 30 minutes of our time, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to bring Jeff Ryan on in here. And hey.
Hi.
I know you didn't know which 3 things I was going to choose.
Not at all. I was like, what is she going to say today? So yeah.
So what else do you want people to know about you before we dive in?
You went on the language route, so I'm also fluent in Japanese. So that freaks people out even more than Spanish. So there you go. Yeah. I'm the senior minister of Riverside CSL here in Riverside, California. And I served our organization for 3 years as the visioning chair of the visioning team for the organization. And I also served for 3 years, 2 of them, as the global themes chair for the global themes team. I stepped away from that 2 years ago, and I stepped away from visioning at the end of that. Stepped away from the chair of visioning team at the end of 2022. So yeah. So
he's in service. He believes in being in service. That I thought about using that as an umbrella, but yes, I'm glad you gave those specific examples. So how you been? You're good?
Good. Things are going well. I had a sabbatical earlier this year. Over the summer, I was on sabbatical, and that was fabulous. I highly recommend it to everyone, whether you are laity, practitioner, minister, or anything in between. Sabbaticals are great. I really appreciated having the time away for me, especially anybody who's a leader. I really, taking that time out and being away and kind of just being removed. I stepped back from everything. My community knew that like the building could burn down, anything could happen, and they were not to contact. So, and I also stepped back. So it was good for me having those boundaries in place. Of course, there were a few folks that could contact me if something, if one of our key members or, one of our members should pass away or need something, then absolutely, I would, do that. But everything went well this summer and nobody contacted me, and it was lovely. I came back.
I love you people, but leave me alone.
Yeah.
I can come back ready to serve in an even more beautiful way.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. I am surprised, or maybe amused is a better word. I am amused sometimes when I hear people say, well, I could never go on sabbatical for 8 weeks or for 12 weeks. I'm like, really? Why? Well, like the myth that everything would fall apart, right, while they were gone. It's like that. Then you need to do a sabbatical more than anyone else.
Right. Absolutely.
Because the community needs to know it can thrive without one, there is no one person.
Right. And ever since I arrived here at Riverside 5+ years ago, I've always said, whose community is this? And I always get, the response is always our community. I said, this is not Jeff's community. I'm part of this community, but this is not my community. This is our community. And so they stepped up, they stepped up. So it's been, and it takes preparation. And fortunately, I have a background in teaching and preparing for substitutes. And so it was like a really preparing for a long-term substitute, to make sure that everything, all the bits and pieces were covered and everybody knew who they needed to contact. And so it worked out. It was great.
So you heard me say we're going to talk about spiritual leaders and inclusion, and we're going to talk about visioning.
Yes.
So it's really risky because on either one of those subjects, I know that we could go for 3 hours or a whole day.
Mhm.
So at random in this moment, I'm going to pick one of them to start, and it's going to be the inclusion.
Okay.
Because I want us to really focus on the spiritual practice of visioning in the toward the end. So I'm looking at my clock so that we only spend a part of our time here, maybe 15 minutes or so, and then more time on visioning. And one of the reasons I want it crosses my mind to talk to you about spiritual leaders and inclusion. There are two main reasons. There are a lot of peripheral reasons, but the two main reasons. One is because when I first met you, actually, you were still in Las Vegas.
Yes.
And you were embarking on an idea and a project of how do we as a spiritual community engage with the people who live like in the 1 mile perimeter of our spiritual center. And that demographic was very, very different than the typical demographic of members and people who attended the center. And so like we had that conversation, and then as a leader at that community, like you were diving into building some bridges, and then you accepted the leadership role at Riverside, and Riverside has a long history of Black leaders, which a lot of centers for spiritual living communities don't have. And then so you come into a community that has had a lot of racial, ethnic diversity, as well as diversity in other ways. And as someone who people look at and say, you know, he's a white man from what they can see, right? How, you know, you've had some transitions or some transformations there. And then, of course, in your leadership roles within CSL, it's been really interesting to see how you integrated your commitment to inclusion when you were on the Global Themes Committee, and when you were on the Global Themes team, and on the leading the visioning team. So I don't want this conversation to be, you know, specifically about CSL, but just what have you learned as a leader in spiritual settings about inclusion? Like, I'm really curious. We haven't really talked about this.
Okay.
I mean, like, what do you feel you have learned? What's been hard for you? What's been easy? Yeah.
Well, for me, inclusion has always been something that's been super important in my life. I don't recall a time when inclusion wasn't important for me personally. It's just part of who I am and how I show up in the world. It's part of my DNA, I guess. But in terms of being a spiritual leader and leading and bringing, you know, really focusing on inclusion, diversity, equity. Let's start with here at Riverside. As you mentioned, we have a history of being African American led for more than 20 years prior to my arrival. And not only African American led, but African American female led. And female led, even prior to African American female led, we've been female led probably for about 30 years. So there was a lot there, a lot here. And I'm really thrilled that we continue to be the diverse community that we always have been. We have, I would say our percentages are about 60% white and about 40% people of color. And so that includes our African American community, that includes our Latina community, that also includes Native Americans, Asians, gay, straight, old, young. We have a gamut from about 22 years old all the way up into their 90s, all actively participating. And so in leading here, inclusion is so important for me that everybody is represented, everybody is included, everybody sees themselves in all leadership roles in everywhere at the center. So our ushers and greeters, it's a diverse usher and greeter team. Our practitioners, our core council, our band, every aspect of the community is, has inclusion at its very core. And so it's been something, what I was looking for when I was visioning for a community, what came through was that it be a multicultural community, that it be a diverse community, because that's what I feel most comfortable in, is being in a diverse multicultural community. And so that was hugely important. And so when I walked in the very first day and was having snacks and stuff after service that very first day, and just looking around the room, and even now I've got God bumps, it's like, here was this beautiful family. The father was from Ghana, and he's been part of this community for years, sitting next to this Latina family that was, that has also been in service here. And just the conversations that they were having and the engagement and everything that was going on, and just seeing how beautiful this community already was. So stepping into that, recognizing that this community already has a deep culture, and rather than trying to impose an outside culture onto this community, I looked first to become part of this community, so that the community is ours. The community is not mine. It's not Reverend Jeffrey's. It's not, when people talk about Riverside, they don't say, oh, Reverend Jeffrey Center. No, they say Riverside Center, or Riverside CSL. And so it's always been, from the very get-go, our. And so I have a lot of folks that are supporting me. I ask questions. I receive feedback. There was a time very early on when a few of our members weren't feeling seen or heard. And so they came to me, said, hey, Rev Jeff, this is kind of what we're feeling, and this is what we're noticing. And, we just want to bring this to your attention because we love you, and we want to bring it to your attention, that this is how this is being perceived in the moment.
And I love that example right there. It's like, creating an environment where people can be and feel included, and it's okay to bring up things that need to change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Because how are you going to change it if you don't know about it?
Right.
Right. And then involving them in the change, or hearing what they suggest to make the change meaningful, is critical. And you can't do that if you don't have the input of the people who are affected directly.
Right. And without building that trust to know that it's a safe space for that conversation to happen too, was very important.
Yeah, I'm thinking as you were using that example, one of the things that went through my mind is how often I have observed, or I have come forward, like I've been asked to help resolve some problem, and the pattern was different. It was like, oh yeah, well, we thought we could bring something up, but when we brought up the issue or the challenge or the request, then we were the ones made to be at fault, right? You're not feeling seen. Well, you need to do something about that. Or you're not feeling seen. Well, what's in your consciousness that makes you feel that you might be invisible? It's nothing that the culture is doing. It's nothing that as a leader I can do about it. You have to go do your work. And in New Thought, we're not just, this is not, CSL, Science of Mind. It's like in New Thought, we tend to go, oh, well, if you are not having the experience you want, then it's really your fault or your consciousness, or you're to blame. And with inclusion, we say we're welcoming,
right?
But then we don't welcome different perspectives or different needs. We don't ask the questions. It's like, oh, you're welcome as long as you come and fit into how we already are.
Yep, exactly. And that's not the way it works. I mean, if we want a truly, in your words, a stained glass community, if we want to have an inclusive community, we have to be willing to listen to each other, and we have to be willing to say, hey, wow, I didn't even realize that we hadn't included that part. I didn't, my bad, total blinders. I own it. Shoot.
Yeah.
All right. So, what can I do to fix this right here and right now?
Yeah. And we all have blind spots.
Right.
We all have blind spots. We can only know what we know based on our experience up until today. So we all have blind spots. And I'm really grateful when people show up and are willing to say, hey, hello, think about this. Like, oh, well, yeah, that's possible. Oh, yeah, that would be really cool. I never would have thought of that. Or, yeah, that'll be really challenging for me to learn a different pronoun, and you're changing your name too. And I've known you for years with this name and using these pronouns, but it's my responsibility. Right? You've made a hard decision, or a decision that maybe wasn't hard, to align yourself with who you believe yourself to be. Why would I not be willing to do the work to change? Because you're changing and I'm changing with you because I care about you. Right. So that's like putting our beliefs into action.
For sure.
Yeah.
And
so what about
feedback, and then inviting feedback after that as well. It's like, okay, so is this what you were looking for? Is this how I, can show up differently? And I appreciate the reminders and, what have you, so that it stays we stay in conversation, we stay in relationship with one another, rather than, okay, I checked that box off. Okay. Tracy's happy. All right. Right. It's so much more than that. It's about relationships. It really is about relationships.
That word right there, relationship. And we know with the people we care most about, relationship doesn't mean the person stays the same.
Right.
It means that we're committed to relationship together. And that means we both change and adapt and flow together as we evolve.
As we continue to grow. Yep. And as our relationship continues to grow as well.
Yeah, hopefully. So right. So let's look. It's one thing when you're in one community and everybody is navigating relationship in one community and building a culture.
Right.
But now you've also been in those roles where in a larger organization, you're interacting with volunteers who are coming from many different communities. And as a leader who has been in that situation more times than I can count over the last 30 years, I find it truly interesting how to get beyond the words of we love everybody.
Mm.
And we're inclusive to make those words match the behaviors.
Right.
So I'm just curious if there are one or two things that come to mind that now have become your go-to thinking or your go-to, your personal commitment when you're in a leadership role with volunteers from lots of different communities. What do you think about, or what do you hold yourself accountable for that represents or reflects your commitment to inclusion?
Right. So in both the global themes role as well as the visioning chair role, when building the teams, I looked at every possible that I could think of, and I asked friends like possible types of diversity there could be, because diversity is not just about race, it's not just about culture. It comes in all shapes and forms. And so what I did with both of those teams is I looked at the organization as a whole, and I looked at whose voices were underrepresented. I looked at whose voices really needed to be at the table, who perhaps were not at the table prior, and wanted to make sure that when we were selecting the teams and selecting the writers for the global themes that one of the years, that we had a really good cross section of the entirety of the organization. So for global themes, the one year we had 6 different languages represented on the team. We had over half of the writers were people of color. We had practitioners, laity, and ministers writing. We had different ages. We had geographic diversity as well. So they were in Australia and Asia and Europe and North and South America. Languaging being included to including he, she, pronoun languaging being included. Sexual orientation, gender identity, all of that was included in looking at people to serve on the team as well as to perform the tasks of the team, etc., so that it was a great cross-section of identity, of culture, of inclusion that we could possibly get for each of the teams. So my personal commitment is always to look at all of the factors, not just, there, of course, the candidate or candidates for the teams need to have qualifications. Of course they do. Of course they do. And a lot of people have the qualifications to vision. A lot of the people have the qualifications to write a talk or put together an outline. A lot of people have this. It's not just, oh, they're friends with Jeff, so of course they're on the team, right? Or they're friends with Tracy, so of course they're on that particular team.
Tracy has no friends.
That was one of the most interesting things in being in those roles, of having friends apply for certain positions, and or certain, the activities, and me having the option, or not the option, but me having the responsibility of saying thank you for applying and not at this time, of turning down the application for a variety of reasons. And so that was it was never a no. It's always a not at this time, not right now.
And you just said something that triggered in me the reminder that 2 reminders. One, that, not at this time is not a no. It's not, it's not that you're not qualified, but a no here is a bigger yes to this. And so sometimes we do forget as leaders, or I've observed a lot of leaders forget that, so you can work well with that person, or you've worked on another committee, or this has been your friend, or someone you went to ministerial school with, and You know them. So yeah, to make it easy, you know you can depend on them.
Mhm.
But then when the whole team is just a group of friends who already know each other,
Right.
or the people who are selected to participate, then we create that blind spot of, and we run the risk of, oh, well, we think alike or we don't think alike, and we already know how where each other comes from. So it'll be easy for us to work through any conflict, or we'll just compromise.
Right.
And so we do get the greatest opportunity when we do expose ourselves to people who have had a different experience, who maybe speak a different language or speak a different language behaviorally than we do, and we don't know who they know. Right. For me, a lot of my commitment to reaching out to different people has been around, they may say yes or no, but if either way, now I can tap into their network through them.
Yes.
So if they say no, I don't want to participate in that, or I'd love to, but I'm already overcommitted. My next question is going to be, so who do you know who might be great for that committee, that team, that convention, that experience? Because I'm sure you know hundreds of people I don't know.
Exactly.
And, right. So it's like not necessarily that individual that is the end result of bringing more diversity in.
And that's how we that's how we accomplished that 1 year where with the global themes is, I asked specific people and they're like, no, I can't. I was like, well, do you know anybody else? And it's like, and then all of a sudden it opened up all of Latin America to me. It opened up all of our region 13. I was like, yeah, I don't have, time, but I do know that, Pablo would be great for it, and Aranzazu would be great for it, and a few other, and it's just like, oh, okay, great. And so then it was a reaching out, and then, and now I know that network of people too. And now I go to Chapala every year, and, it's great, to be part of and to really see the global impact that new thought can truly have.
Yeah. Well, I love this. And I promised that we wouldn't spend the whole time on this.
I'll come back. I heard you. I heard that. I was like, yes, okay, I accept. So.
Yes, that public, before you're on camera, yes. Maybe if I invite him back in front of the world, there'll be a little added pressure to say yes. But what you're most known for really is your love of and your commitment to visioning.
Yes.
And there are people, this is on the New Thought Media Network, so everybody's not Centers for Spiritual Living. Everyone doesn't necessarily know who Michael Bernard Beckwith is or what the visioning practice is. So I don't want you to do the whole history. I just want you to summarize, how do you describe the practice, the spiritual practice of visioning, and how is that different from vision boards or visualization?
Okay. So visioning is tapping into the higher intuition that you have within yourself. It's tapping into your higher wisdom self. Call it your God self, call it spirit, call it whatever you choose to call it. But it is turning within and going within and silencing and getting really quiet and still. And then asking a series of questions about what is spirit's highest idea, your intuition's highest idea, again, whatever languaging you choose, of itself, expressing as your life, as a project, as your center, what have you. Because that infinite mind has so much more knowledge than our limited mind. Our individualized mind, yes, is part of the overall mind, the overall consciousness, and we're individualized expressions of that. And so we can tap into that higher idea if we are quiet and still and align ourselves. So it's tapping into that to receive information. So we do that through a series of questions. What is Spirit's highest idea? What do I need to release? What do I need to embrace? What do I need to become? And is there anything else to be revealed at this time? And so it's a practice of really getting in touch with your intuition and learning to listen to that still small voice, learning to listen to that spiritual guidance that is always within and that is always speaking to us that we sometimes forget to listen to. And so there is this higher, broader idea that we can tap into, and if we're paying attention. So one of the ways I suggest even begin practicing is sit at the end of a street, at the end of your street, perhaps, and sit there and wait and just simply be present with, am I going to go right or am I going to go left today? And rather than consciously thinking about it, just feel into your intuitive body, your intuitive self. I was like, okay, today I'm going to go right. And then follow that path, right? It's just learning to trust that intuition. So that's kind of flexing that muscle. But visioning is really listening to and tapping into that higher wisdom self. Visualization, on the other hand, and vision boarding is a mental technique that we use. It's a visualization technique that we use where we already have something in mind. We've already have this idea in mind. I want that relationship. I want that car. I want that house. I want that thing, right? And then we begin to visualize it. We begin to visualize every detail of it, see it. We begin to feel into it. We begin to resonate with it energetically. We get excited about it so that it draws to us what it is that we are wanting. So visualization is about drawing to, right? You picture something and you draw it to you. You're trying to manifest it to you, right? Whereas visioning, we don't manifest the vision. We're not trying to pull the vision to us. Rather, the vision is pulling us toward it when we are in alignment with it. So visualization is a manifesting technique. Visioning is a receptive technique. So it's one is a directive technique, the other is a receptive technique. And when we do what I call the work of visioning, which is the transformation of visioning, when we participate in that, then all things are added. We don't need to worry about making the vision happen. We are working within ourselves, within the realm of release, embrace, and body. And we come into greater alignment with what already is. And so then the vision pulls us to it.
I love that. And I think it's really helpful. And just share some of the ways that you have incorporated the use of visioning in your own personal life.
Okay. So when Ed and I, my husband and I, when I proposed to him, then we began visioning for our wedding. So we began visioning for the ceremony itself. What is Spirit's highest idea of the ceremony? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? What do we need to let go of? What do we need to embrace? What do we need to embody for this? So we visioned multiple times, and our wedding was the expression of that visioning. But beyond the wedding, we visioned for our marriage. We visioned for our relationship. In fact, we were vision partners before we became partners. In fact, I met him in Essential Ernest Holmes, proving that classes do change lives. And then he and I went through all of our practice. We went through all of our prerequisites together. We went through all of our our practitioner training together, and we graduated as practitioners at the same time together. So that's one, that's just one example. So he and I visioned for our vacations. We visioned for my sabbatical. We continue to vision on a regular basis as a couple in our lives. For my own personal ministry, way back when Eddie and I were visioning together, I saw what came through visioning. I saw a window with a lot of trees behind it, and me standing in front of that window, standing and speaking on a stage in front of a group of people with this window and these trees behind me. And when I walked through the door here at Riverside CSL in 2017 as a guest speaker, I opened the sanctuary door, and lo and behold, there's the window with trees. And the real kicker was the children's choir was rehearsing Ricky Byers, Use Me. And I knew I was home, So but I didn't go online and search for, okay, where is a center in all of 450 communities that has a window with trees outside of it, and let me go and search that out and try and find that. That would have been visioning. That would have been visualization, right? Trying to do that, trying to energize or trying to align with that. No, I had this vision way back in 2009, right? And I arrived here in 2017. And so it was about, okay, so I see this vision of standing on a stage, standing in front of this tree, standing in front of this window, loving this diverse community. All right. So what must I release? What must I let go of for this vision to manifest through, or to live itself through me? What must I embrace? How must I transform myself within myself to be in alignment with this community that is, this vision that I'm seeing?
Right, and that community exists, and it is preparing for me, and I am preparing for it, and I don't have to force it. I don't have to make it happen. And I think that for me is the most frustrating piece about visioning, because I'll vision or I'll lead visioning with a group, and they've invited me to lead visioning with them. And then they want to turn it into, oh, well, that's our action plan. Right. Oh, well, I got that. And so literally I'm supposed to go do that right now. Mm-hmm. Or you can tell that they're putting in to, the visioning process, and they're transparent about it. Well, this is what I know. And so this is what we should do, or this is what I think.
Right.
And like, okay, you missed the whole the preparation going into the visioning. You just didn't hear any of that.
Right.
And so that for me is the most frustrating thing when I'm leading groups. And it's the most empowering part when I do visioning for my own life, my own business, my own way of being a leader in the world. Because for me, it's like, oh, I can feel this is the way that spirit is going to and is right now expressing. Mm-hmm. And I don't have to do anything but, I don't have to make it happen.
Right.
Yes, I need to look for ways to embody. I need to look for ways to embrace. I need to look for and be attentive to what I need to release. But it's not a 1 + 1 + 1 = 3 equation, and it's going to happen in the next 30 days.
Right.
So yeah, when it does happen, a lot of times I'm like, oh, that's what that meant. I didn't even know what it meant when I did visioning, but I kept getting this pattern, or I kept
Mhm.
getting this color.
Mhm.
It made no sense to me. And then I'll realize I'm in the middle of experiencing that pattern
Right.
or being offered something that is that color, and it's right.
Mhm.
It's exactly what is required.
Yep.
Then I'll be like, oh, that's what that visioning process was about a year ago.
Yeah. For 5 years during ministerial school, every visioning, when we would ask, is there anything else to be known at this time? I would get, I've been working on the railroad. Like, I would hear the song every single time. I would even try not to get it, and there it was, right? You know, like I was like, okay, let me experiment here. Like, nope, there it was. The very next visioning after I was licensed as a minister, it stopped. I was like, oh, okay. Lay in the tracks, lay in the groundwork. Got it. But in that moment, if I had tried to like figure out, okay, what is the metaphysical meaning of,
What's the metaphysical meaning of railroad crossing? What is
right,
it?
right.
Who
And we
wrote
had
that
Kermit the
song?
Frog. I always use Kermit the Frog as, one of them, because we had Kermit the Frog come through one time, in one of the visioning sessions when we had Vision Corps at Greater Las Vegas. That was Kermit the Frog that came through. I was like, well, that's random. What, and if you go down a rabbit hole trying to figure out what Kermit the Frog means in this context, especially if you're type A leaders who are, on a core council or board of trustees are like, what the heck does Kermit the Frog have to do with anything? This does not make sense. There's no value here. Stop it. It's, yeah, you're headed in the wrong direction. Kermit the Frog ended up being joy, but, and conscience. So.
Wow, that's a great example. So I know that you are often invited to lead visioning for groups and for teams and for individuals. And I know that you work with coaching clients as well. And I'm guessing that with your coaching clients, you do way more than just visioning. So tell me a little bit about that practice and what you do.
So with coaching clients, we start with visioning. We start with identifying that higher idea. And then we really dive into what must be released, what must be embraced, what must be embodied. That's really where the work of transformation is. That's really where the work of coming into alignment with spirit, with the vision is. So my LLC is Live Your Vision, but my DBA is Jeff Ryan. And so I work with folks who are wanting to discover their vision, wanting to move forward, wanting to make a change in their lives, and really tap into Spirit's highest idea for them, for their lives, and then beginning to make the shifts, make the adjustments, make the changes that will bring you into greater alignment with the vision. Again, it's not about manifesting the vision. We're not going to create vision boards together or anything like that, but we will work deeply to uncover those hidden beliefs, the stories that we've been telling ourselves, the underlying commitments that we have, the shadows, working there to really clear up the way, to remove the obstacles so that we can then have the mindset shift that then places us right in the path of spirit and pulls us right to the vision. And vision is ongoing. It's never ending, never ending. Just because I'm here at CSL, Riverside CSL with my tree and my windows doesn't mean that I'm done, right? The vision continues to.
Yes, and so we sometimes do forget that. It's like, oh, I was visioning and then it occurred. So like, poof, everything is done. No, right? No, because if we truly are living this spiritually grounded life, we are constantly not only expressing, but through that expressing, we are expanding. And as we expand, that transforms us and we evolve. So I love that. And I think we've given people quite a bit of the view of Jeffrey Ryan, from the commitment to inclusion and living in a way that you integrate that into everything you do, especially as a leader, to this really solid understanding and use of visioning to coaching. So there's a lot of potential for, I can imagine people saying, oh, well, wait, I need to know more about that. And so we did have the email up if people have questions about any of those three or want your insight about any of those three things, to reach out to you at coach@jeffryan.online.
Yes, absolutely.
So always, yes, you're coming back.
Okay, yeah, for sure.
Yes, you're coming back, because I have like 6 questions in my head that I want to ask you, and we don't have time for me to ask you even one of them. So take a deep breath. And is there anything that comes to mind that you want to be sure to share with people today?
That you can live your vision. It absolutely is possible. You can live your vision, and you don't have to wait. You can live your vision today. Right now.
Thank you, Reverend Jeffrey Ryan, for being my guest today on Poetry, Prayer, and Practice.
My honor.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So everybody, you know that what's coming up is more good stuff on Poetry, Prayer, and Practice. Have some conversations coming up in the next couple of weeks about labyrinths and about not so much Halloween, but some other spiritually grounded practices that are often closely connected to Halloween or to fall and to harvest season. And that's what's coming up in the month of October. And then November, there's even more great stuff. So please come, mark your calendar, check us out every Tuesday at noon Mountain Time. Mark your calendar, and then always just check in to see who we will be talking to next. My name is Tracy Brown. I'm so delighted to be your host, and I really hope to see you again next week.
Thanks for watching. Join us again next week, or watch on demand at www.ntmedia.org or youtube.com/New Thought Media Network. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring. Learn more at www.ntmedia.org.